So should I start? Hi. It's a bit of time to figure the technicalities of this live transmission. My name is Larisa, and I'm happy to co-host this online conversation with Olivia Berkowicz and Marianna Feher, Tentative Transmits, who in their turn also invited researcher Sanja Horvatinčić. Excuse me if I pronounced it wrong.
Okay.
And I'm going to hand this over to Olivia.
Thank you so much, Larisa, for this very kind invitation to be part of Do It by Heart's exhibition program, together with yourself and other invited guests. And just on a small practical note before we begin, this session will be recorded for internal archiving, just so everyone knows. And this evening is situated within the frame of a newly initiated research project at the Royal Institute of Art in Stockholm. And the project is called Tentative Transmits, as Larisa introduced. And the project is conducted by myself and Marianna Feher. And the project itself attempts to reclaim lost sites and spaces of Eastern European narratives by transposing notions around, in quotation marks, the former East. So the project will develop as a discursive radio platform through which we will explore archival findings on the Eastern Bloc's transnational and multicultural phenomena in order to reflect on post-socialist transitions as pluriversal sites of knowledge production. So this is a long-term research project where we strive to cultivate new forms of sensible and discursive participation that foreground a plurality of voices and interdisciplinary practices. Tentative Transmits investigates possible ways to write across media, authorships and readerships, letting the production constitute dialogues from within the practice itself by interlinking contexts, biographies, and histories.
Yes, so for this first iteration of Tentative Transmits and the first intervention within the framework of the exhibition Do It by Heart, we have passed on the invitation to Sanja Horvatinčić, who will, in short, talk about an ongoing research project called Heritage from Below that is conducted by herself together with a team of architects, anthropologists, and artists, where they have been investigating Drežnica, a rural area in Croatia, in relation to the site's history and traces linked to the Yugoslav anti-fascist resistance during the Second World War, while also reflecting on current political and social issues. And today, Sanja will present a lecture on this research with the title Unlearning Heritage, Rewinding the Past, Reversing the Present. And Sanja Horvatinčić is a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute of Art History in Zagreb, and her research focuses on Second World War memorial sculpture and architecture, as well as the production of history through cultural practices in socialist Yugoslavia. And in her research, she employs a critical interdisciplinary approach to heritage as a way to further investigate the contemporary potential of Yugoslav memorial structures and concepts. And one of her most recent projects is the Heritage from Below project, as I just mentioned, which will also be the main focus of her talk today. And we're very happy to have Sanja with us here tonight. And not only that, Sanja will also end her presentation with the premiere of a short documentary made in relation to the project by the visual artist and filmmaker Matia Crowley, who's also a member of the research team. And if you have any troubles while viewing the film, we will also attach the Vimeo link and the password, so everyone can also watch it on their own. And after Sanja's presentation and the screening of the film, we will meet again all together with Larisa and Sanja for a roundtable conversation. So if you have any questions for any of the participants, please write them in the comment section below, and we will bring them up in our conversation. And yeah, we're really happy that everyone is here with us tonight. And now we would like to pass the word over to you, Sanja.
Okay, thank you. thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this very inspiring event that is related to the exhibition that unfortunately we are not able to see at the moment, but hopefully we will. Yeah, I hope that it seems to me that from the proposal I got, and I will speak a little bit about it, it seems to me that it is kind of a very good connection that we are having here with this three levels of production, let's say, like some kind of a curatorial approach, problematic, then more of a scientific research or academic research, and an artistic project. So I will begin here just to see if, is it okay? I hope you everyone sees the okay. I met Olivia Berkowicz in Stockholm in 2018. I was invited there to give a lecture about Yugoslav monuments and memorials as part of another project by an Iranian artist, Behzad Khosravinori. And Olivia then told me about her curatorial or her interest in research on the artist Lenke Rotman, a Hungarian Jew who survived Holocaust and lived and worked after the war in Sweden. So to mark the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, the concentration camp, and the end of the war, Lenke Rotman came back to the site of the trauma and responded to it as by then already established international artist. She made a cast of one of the preserved railway tracks in the camp, near the place where her family was murdered by the Nazis. She made a replica of that specific fragment of the camp and enclosed it in a transparent square box. She inserted a colorful ball on top of the tracks. A lot can be observed in this sinister terrarium crafted by an Auschwitz survivor, a spatially and temporarily displaced experience, an irony of the notion of authenticity, a memorial as a hyper-realistic documentation of the present. So these are all question marks. Also an inspiration and kind of an introduction to my own inquiries and questions. So 2 years later, Olivia and Marianna invited me to talk about my work in response to their project called Tentative Transmits, through which they are seeking a way to, I quote, put the relationship of archive and memory into question by examining materialist histories, social structures, and their hidden spaces. Our interest lies within how to better grasp our own socio-political implications and engage with their inherent struggles. End of quote. They are, as they say, quote, striving to cultivate new forms of sensible and discursive participation that foreground a plurality of voices and interdisciplinary practices, end of quote. So I was very much able to identify in many ways with the interests and requests put forward in this description of the project. And in attaining their aims, Marianna and Olivia are aiming, or they intend to employ the medium of radio. Radio was one of the key technical devices that made possible the anti-fascist struggle and alternative forms and ideas of social and political order during the World War II in Yugoslavia. Through my own work, I have been tracing the rich material, culture, and visual archives of that period, which inspired the versatile and experimental culture of memorialization forms and strategies that proliferated in the period of socialism, that is between 1945 and 1990. So through my research that has been mainly focusing on the Yugoslav memorial production, among other things, I was trying to understand processes through which certain designated places of social and political relevance became monuments or memorial sites. How they have been selected and how the labor of the interpretation of the past was divided among different experts, delegated to specialized domains of cultural production. Also, how with the passing of the time and exchange of and the shift of generation, they were becoming concern or objects of study of people who couldn't or who came to believe that they shouldn't develop effective relations to those experiences and memories of those who inherited them. Finally, for that very same reason, systematic changes induced by memory politics easily obliterates or hijacks the past that is significant to individuals and communities who find them meaningful in their present. So more recently, I have been dealing more specifically with how the materiality of the past can become instrumental and significant in our efforts to reestablish those lost or negated connections. It has always felt crucial for me to go to those places and to practice fieldwork, to become physically present in those spaces, but also with the communities where they matter. Even more so, it became important when I started to realize that monuments, Yugoslav monuments, were getting completely on the one hand, completely disinherited on the local level with the shift of memory politics in the local sphere. And then on the other hand, they became the matter of interest of remote or uninformed observers who only saw spectacular images in these memorials. So I was getting more and more concerned also with the easiness, and this relates us back to the medium, to the transits or the tentative transits. I was more and more concerned with the easiness that technology allows us to transfer or abduct images and materials from their original settings. Among other things, I tried to speak to people in the site in the village that I will talk about, where we are doing this research, about the fact that their monument dedicated to the hospital, has been represented in a very prestigious catalogs and exhibitions in the West. They were glad, but what they asked me when I told them this, they asked me, would it help us to rebuild to bring back our nurse? What they meant by that is that they didn't really care so much about the reproduction of the great artistic value of these concrete monuments, but they cared more about the significant images that were taken away from them, that were somehow stolen from the sites of memory that belong to them. You will get more, you will get more ideas about what I'm talking about a bit later. So anyway, I was very much intrigued by the way that monuments somehow needed to settle in and elaborate the spaces of the past that they were supposed to signify in certain ways. And to come back a bit more to the previous element I mentioned, it is the memorialization of the sites such as Auschwitz. I was very much also intrigued of how it was possible to rethink or reimagine, or maybe even to introduce the term unlearn what monument or memorials were and what they could be in response to a new type of memorial sites that they should commemorate. Another such example that is very much something I was dealing with, and it is somehow related to the previous example, is the big competition that was organized in the 50s, in the late 50s, for one site of execution near Belgrade. and which also produced certain innovative ideas of how to imagine new forms of being in such places and symbolizing the traumas, whether by through some expressive forms or by expanding the symbolic landscape around the sites, such sites of memory, or perhaps by, as the winning project actually wanted to do but never did because it was never realized, how to kind of protect or enclose the very site where the murders were taking place, how to kind of concentrate the emptiness and draw a certain significance out of that emptiness and non-intervention in such sites. This is actually the example I have chosen also in relation to the authorship of the memorial that will pop out later during this presentation, the memorial in Drežnica. And also to kind of round it up with these ideas of what was to think of a new form of monuments was also this sketch that I found in the archive of the artist, where when he was thinking of how to do this new form of memorial, he also thought of putting up an antenna there, of putting up some kind of transmitter, because it seemed that it is not enough to have only a material structure. It appeared as there appeared to be some certain technical ambition to transmit the meaning further. So I will now talk about what we are doing in the project that has been evolving for almost 2 years now, in a site that we chose to tackle in a community that has become our own in a way through this process. And I will be talking about 3 scales of inquiry that we have been doing. So the project itself is an international and interdisciplinary project that aims to deal with a new approach to come up with new methodology of heritage. So in the first scale, we actually are coming from the perspective that we're talking about a certain area that was defined and as such remembered as an area of liberated territories, meaning that during the Second World War on the territory of Yugoslavia, the partisan anti-fascist struggle that was active from the early days of the war, from 1941, from the summer 1941, was based on the idea, or the tactics of this struggle was based on the idea that in order to win against a larger enemy and a much more organized forces, it is necessary to secure liberated small parts of liberated land, in which they could from which they could put in action armed struggle, but also where they could practice another alternative form of social and political order. So these liberated territories were very specific form of, and very successful in the end, form of organizing the struggle. And they also meant the very close collaboration between the local population and the partisans as armed units. What was very significant for this kind of tactics and struggle was that it was very much related and dependent on the configuration of the landscape and the interrelation between human and nature. And thinking about such cartographic representations or the ideas of the space, and going and trying to prepare for our own investigations and inquiries in those areas, we were looking at different representations, from the very classic cartographic one that I just showed to this one that were actually produced by hand-drawn maps indicating certain important spots that were crucial for the resistance in that area. Those were mainly the partisan camps that were located in the circular manner around that area of Drežnica. So Drežnica is basically a settlement. It is as similarly to other spaces, other such settlements, it is divided in smaller hamlets and located in the wider area in the mountain landscape in the central Croatia. So after the war, what becomes interesting is that along with the with memorialization of more or less standard typology, such as memorial plaques or small memorials with sculptures or architectural interventions. The idea of monument was actually more related to the area itself. So these areas were known as another category that was made up during the 60s. It was known as memorial areas or spomen područja. And they were not only meant to be managed by certain heritage institutions, but they were also meant to be an economic factor. They were meant to be a sort of a social and an economic base for the development of those communities. But they were mainly defined by the memory of some kind of imprint in the landscape of what used to consist the liberated territory. So in this study, there are some excerpts from the studies from early 70s that was done for this area of Partizanska Drežnica with the location of the memorials within the area, but also what is more, what is significant for this kind of approach. It also generated environmental concerns, and it generated the system of the protection of nature. So the zones of the protections were defined of the natural and cultural landscape, but also of the memorial landscape. So certain elements in the landscape were protected in order to preserve the historic environment. And what we are doing when we wander around that landscape, when we are guided by the local people to show us the different sites, we are basically also mapping new, we are developing a methodology to map certain new locations that matter to the community and that has not been yet put into the, let's say, a register or validated through any kind of heritage system. But this is a work in progress where we are trying to also to kind of create certain layered memorial landscapes. And why, in the end, it really matters, and why these inquiries of scale are important. It is important because today we are facing certain new challenges that are brought about by the systemic difficulties that the community there is facing. One of them is the intention of a big company, energetic company, to flood this landscape that used to be protected, and to build a dam in the location. So all of this brings us back to this expanded notion of what memorial or monument could be or was at a certain point, and we are also like trying to take into consideration those practices and those ideas that started to be developed in the period of socialism, but that are now supposed to be supplemented by the results that we are of the research that we are conducting there. So on the second scale of inquiry would be our concern, and this is the result of the interdisciplinary work with archaeologists in the team, of what remained invisible with the layering with the passing of time, and how this connection between the memory and the materiality of the past can be reestablished by doing archaeological excavations in certain sites. So here we were also partially inspired, or I myself was inspired when I approached archaeologists with the practice that was developed already in the 60s, when the conservation and heritage institutions at the time were kind of opening for initiatives by certain individuals who wanted to expand the methodologies of heritage work. So in this particular case, we are talking about the site of the former partisan hospital that was one of the locations in that liberated territory that I spoke about. It was one of the central locations and symbolic places that gathered the community through the war, and then as such continue to be remembered after the war. And the key person of that institution, we could say, from the wartime period of the hospital, was a woman who was a political commissar and who survived the war and who wanted very much to memorialize that site. She kept coming back, talking to the people whom she knew, from the local people whom she knew back from the wartime period. And slowly they started to gather like a consortium of different interested stakeholders, including the local museum and the National Heritage Center, and they started to do this kind of inquiries in the landscape. And they did basically very similar thing what we are doing now, but they didn't employ maybe systematic methodology regarding the archaeology itself. They were looking at what was on the surface, recognizing these objects and taking them, identifying them, putting them in the museum, but somehow not really connecting those objects with the narratives or with the memorials that were built on those sites. And what we were doing, as I said, is coming back to some of those sites and to some other sites that they haven't been visited. And we are trying to also see where we have potential to do more of a systematic research, scientific research, and which would include also proper excavations. So one of the very important narratives about in the local community about the wartime period was its continuous its continuous destruction. As the village itself was located on the crossroads of different paths and different zones of occupation, Italian, then later German Nazi occupation, and also local collaborators, it was all the time exposed to attacks, and it was very much well known as a partisan stronghold. So it was another reason that it was attacked. So there is this famous notion among the locals of the fact that the village was burned 7 times and rebuilt each time anew. So this resilience of the local people to kind of be there at the place and to rebuild time and again from the ashes their modest settlements, their modest houses, is something that is very, very inspiring. This is also something that we wanted to engage with as researchers. So one of the sites that we did research on is not exactly the same house that you saw before, because it was very difficult to identify it, but it is another site that is also very important in the local memory. It is the Central Partisan Camp, located in the forest close to the village of Tomići. And it is a site where we could that was burned down, and that enabled us to kind of detect the very specific stratigraphic layers, and to kind of make it clear to identify the processes that really happened there during the war, when the partisans were occupying this house. That was also done in collaboration and due to hospitality of the local people who wanted to support the partisan movement, and they gave them their venues, so they occupied this space, and then at some certain point they had to leave it. But what they did, they left behind them certain material traces, the objects that we can now excavate, and then we can through which we can make more sense of what really happened there, and who were these people and what were they maybe doing there. Another site, another place where we also did this kind of inquiry was in a cave, which was a site of refugees, like a shelter for refugees during the attacks, and where we also managed to extract, find, and document certain material evidence of their presence there. So these are the finds that we come up with at the very end of this kind of research. Also material that belonged to the hospital that was hidden in a cave close to the monument, that hasn't been excavated before, then hasn't been even interacted with by the local people, and that also can tell us a lot about not only the fact that there was a hospital hidden in the cave, but also the fact that these bottles and these essentials that were used for healing the wounded people during the war were of Italian production, meaning that they were taken, they were somehow pirated and taken in order to help those in need. And what we do also in the end, what is very important when we talk about the transmits or the some kind of a mediation of this kind of expert methodologies is to kind of come out with what we are doing with the community, to organize gatherings and to talk and ask what they find meaningful and whether they find meaningful what we are doing at all. And the third scale of inquiry would be the archives, or something that we could say that already exists as an organized knowledge. Of course, we can, as an organized sense of the past through collections. And these collections are something that has been very much discussed about and disputed over within the theoretical framework of decolonizing, and which in this very local context is showing another face of what the collection can be, and how a collection that has an emancipatory potential can also be destroyed or reversed back to its or just basically with the attempt to negate or erase history that is meaningful for the community. It is also a question of course, when we talk about the archives, we also very often encounter the photographic archive and the medium of photography. And we can also pose a question of how we approach this kind of scenes from today's perspective. Who were the people behind the camera at that moment, and was in this particular case the intention of the one who documents one that was kind of standing with the refugees, or just documenting them for scientific purpose. What we are also trying to do is, for this very reason, for these questions that are posed, that come up with such images, we are trying to connect the people or the subjects to people who are still alive, and the people or the community that remembers those events. So in the local community, everybody knows transgenerationally about this experience of being refugee in another country because of the wartime experience. And doing the field work, we are encountering people who were actually part, or some of the faces from those photographs, and supplementing that kind of, in that way, the archive with the voices of these people is very much meaningful from our perspective. It is also meaningful from the perspective for the reason that some of these subjects, historical subjects that we want to empower in a way through this process, were illiterate, or were never asked about their experience of the war, although Drežnica was all about the war experience. So this woman, for example, was very much confused when we approached her and asked her, what is your memory of war? And she said, it's not important. My memory is not important. And then through a conversation, we managed somehow to get her to talk, and we found out very soon that she's illiterate. So all of these topics are coming out when we are kind of trying to make sense of the archival items. These items are also sometimes confusing and intriguing, and they are leading us towards new questions and ideas or plans that what we could do. This is an image that I recently came across in a kind of a discarded part of the archive of the Croatian Historical Museum. I was actually given this image. It was not even part of the official list of their inventory. So we're just given this to take it with me, and it is a series of these images that were made within a wooden hut located very close in that area that I spoke about. That was an agitprop location. Was basically a place where all of the cultural production was happening, and all of the like partisan cultural and propaganda was situated. These images are intriguing in the way that we see that they're very bad quality, because they were obviously done by someone there with the camera that was not really functioning well, or that the film was not really preserved well. But we see these faces and the interactions between them, and it opens up an imagination of what was it like to be there during the war, and trying to distribute information, distribute knowledge, because basically what they did was they printed leaflets, they printed different newspapers, even poetry, political texts, etc. So from this kind of archival images, we are also looking into the sites, and we have an idea and a projection to work on an excavation on the site of that on that wooden hut that was also burned down, to kind of investigate more into that narrative. And also the archive that was part of the collection, of an official collection, but that now has been disinherited in a way that became unwanted from the point of view of the official memory politics. And the institutions all over Croatia are kind of like getting rid of, or unless they already have gotten rid of, material that is related to the partisan struggle and everything that has to do with the Second World War resistance. And these materials are, if you're lucky enough, located in certain invisible spots in these institutions, in the attics, a typing machine that most probably or could have been part of the inventory of that wooden hut. Or, for example, certain material evidence or audio evidence of how interest similar to us has been lost or forgotten. It is the audio recording of the testimonies of the people from Drežnica from '69, done by a historian who was then a curator of the museum, but that was discarded and left almost for the garbage in the museum. Luckily, we managed to extract the sound, and it is still useful for us. Or this kind of extremely intriguing objects. It is a notebook made of scraps of papers from basically some kind of market inventory, but that has completely different content written in them. It is a content about the emancipatory politics and cultural politics that is very much inspiring in relation to the sites that we are interested in. Or this kind of lost or forgotten, rejected documents and testimonies that are also implying a wider international ambitions in terms of anti-fascist struggle in that area of the local woman, a document of a local woman who took part in the Spanish Civil War during the late 30s, that is discarded, as I said, from the archive, extracted from the archives. Or when we look at all of these materials, then we can also notice that, and if we don't, and since we already see that many of these extremely valuable documents and items have been extracted from institutions, then we don't really need to look into the institutions alone. We can also look into the private archives in the villages to see what people are actually and how people are actually taking care of objects that they find important. This is one such example in the village in one of the hamlets in Reznica, where the owner keeps the crate, the wooden crate that was US aid that was given during the 44 by the parachutes to the local community, and that was preserved with very much intention and with the awareness of the importance of keeping such items in some kind of local personal collections. This is also something that we are interested in, how to engage with this kind of how to, on the one hand, unlearn the practices of what is usually considered to be a curatorial museum practice, and how to kind of learn from below, from the community, what it means to be taken care of, and how to recognize the objects that are relevant for the community. And finally, and I'm going to end with this, it is just a closing remark on how, regarding the monuments, on how we could think of an alternative ways once or in the situation in which there is no official heritage system that takes care of this kind of symbolic legacy of anti-fascist struggle, how it is still resiliently taken care of, in some way substituting or not even wanting or needing this kind of institutionalized heritage practices to continue commemorative rituals and practices. So in this place where you see the candles, there used to be a bronze relief, a monument that was stolen, and that is the one that I was asked by the community to return, or whether the MoMA exhibition could help us return that monument. Unfortunately, I don't think so. Another example in the local, in that area of a demolished mine monument at the graves of the people from Reznica that were shot in 41 for giving resistance to fascism, that whose text has recently been anonymously replicated with red stencil letters to kind of keep the memory. This mining, this destruction happened maybe 30 years ago, 25 years ago, but still there is this effort to kind of bring it back, to kind of bring back the memory and the knowledge of what happened from within the community. This is not an ordered art, commissioned art project. This is not part of any kind of institutional care. And what we are also trying to do, inspired by this practices and kind of also enticed by the local communities, actually trying to bring back what is missing. And one of the things that was missing due to the lack of institutional heritage care was the plague, the memorial plague at the site of the hospital, which we this year managed to return return as it used to be. And with the local community, with the help of the local community, we managed to give it a very celebratory tone to the whole ceremony. So yeah, in this way, and this is going to be a kind of a closing, a closure now, and I think I'm already over time. I would conclude with the statement that there is some progressive and liberating sense in undoing learned practices and revising the past. when we are faced with forced disinheritance, a phenomenon we have been experiencing in post-Yugoslav context for 30 years or so. As opposed to the sinister sense of continuity within the heritage and knowledge production systems and institutions in the centers of imperial power, the frequent and abrupt shifts of paradigms, so from economic colonies in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, followed by fascist regime in the 40s, then through emancipatory politics of the socialist period, and then all the way to the violent reaction in the 80s, which in different institutional ways seeks to reset the development and bring it back to the ancient regime. We have been used to, or we have been accustomed to moving back and forth, continually forced to learn and to unlearn. And hesitantly, we were aware, and we are being aware of the constructedness of these notions, such as heritage. So in my opinion, this offers a fertile ground for questioning and shifting the paradigms further. So Ariela Azoulay offers a great analysis of the role of photography in the imperial project. She uses the role or the function of the shutter of a photo camera as a synecdoche for the operation of the imperial enterprise altogether. And we could say it is similar to the role of institutional recognition of heritage, like an official stamp or some kind of extraction from the conclusions of expert committees that determine the nominal value for the traces and memories of the past. So faced with the fact that none of the sites and stories that we engage with in this project have such stamps and validations at the moment, we are actually unlearning heritage. And what we are doing is learning what it is from below and learning how and what we should do to employ our knowledge, our technical skills or methodologies that we have through our disciplinary practices to make it operational for the people who already are taking care of these objects and stories. And in the end, I do not have any illusions about this. I think that the scope of our possibilities within this emancipatory approach to heritage is very, very limited. Without an all-encompassing change of the system, the superstructure of heritage, however radically we question it or redefine it, has no foundations. So potential histories we can mediate through an alternative treatment of heritage are here to strengthen those processes and to empower the stakeholders and to encourage them in struggle to reverse the present and to envision a better collective future. So this is also why I think the notion of tentative transmits, also visible in this picture, seem equally fitting to what we are doing. So I will finish here and I will just briefly introduce Matia Crowley, whose film we are going to see now. So Matia is an experimental media artist and a film. Oh, I also forgot to just finish with with some brief overview of the project and the team of collaborators that are on the project, and you can also find more on the online on our website. So Matia is an experimental media artist and filmmaker who graduated from the Zagreb Academy of Fine Arts. His work is mostly centered on politics of documenting and representations of migrations, borders, and conflict zones. During the last 4 years, he has been following and recording migration influx on the so-called Balkan route, all the way from the Slovenian, Croatian to the Turkish-Syrian border. I will skip the part with the project that he has done so far. I think we can discuss that a bit later. I will just give a brief note on the film itself. It is film that was made as part of the project of the 4 fieldwork trips there. And this one in particular, the footage that was used for this one is concerning 1 week in the community with the research team with the focus on the migrant question, and you can see and we can discuss it later.
Thank you, Sanja. Then I will share. the film on my computer. So thank you.
I have to stop sharing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just a second.
Vrijeme rata, vi ste bili cijelo vrijeme u ovom području. Sve, bili smo u pećinu, pod zemljom, sve, u kolibama. Bile su guste šume, da. A nije bilo puteva po njima, pa smo se lako skrivali. A sad se ne bi mogli. Sad izvlače šumu, prave šumske puteve, nemaš se gdje sakriti više. Yes, it's huge hall with wooden like pieces for beds.
Okay.
You can squeeze. You have to go a bit further and down. Je poginuo neko od vaše obitelji, porodice?
Poginuo.
Da.
U danu 32. Sve kako mi kažemo prvo i drugo koljeno. Au.
It's very similar to manometer. It's made in bronze, very heavy. This is the point to fix to the probably bottle of oxygen.
I sad mi nismo imali vode, nego su u šumi velike snježnice bile. To je ko provalija i tu je snijeg star možda 50 godina. Onda bi se mlađi dečki po štrikima spuštali dolje, pa bi sjekli to u košare, dizali i onda bi to topili na suncu i svakog malo bi popili.
I još je bilo nešto blaga i brže jednu flašu vode, jednu flašu mlijeka i tata imao uvijek tražiti inače. Ali jesti nije bilo što beš, bilo je ovaca. Onda svaki dan ispete jednu ovu podijeli. Ja i razumijem, i tu jedni daju zadnji zaloga iz kuće. Žene, djeca, stariji ljudi. A ima među njima i drugi. Nisu oni svi izbjeglice. Ali kakav god da je, kad mi dođe na vrata, ja ne mogu da mu ne ponudim i pojesti i popiti.
A dođu vam često?
Pa sad meni ovdje ne. Ne, jer ovo im je ruta tamo prema Primorju. Ali ove prve kuće dolje kroz selo, da. Onda ako neko nazove, ima i takvi policiju, onda bježe. Ali to onda samo prolaze. Projure idu dalje da i policija ne uvati.
A vi niste imali nešto neugodno iskustvo?
Ništa. Kažu da je ovu kućicu gore provaljeno, on je bio i Sabor je bio 4 godine žive na ovom Vinčovsku, ali ja ne vjerujem da se to. To je neko tu.
Plaćam redovito članarinu i član sam izvršnog odbora, ali nekakvi lovački uspjeha baš je.
Nema. A šta najviše divljači ovdje ima?
Jelen, crno, divlje svinje.
Nema medvjeda?
Ima, samo skupi su nama za odstrel. To uglavnom tražimo lovca koji najnovčanik malo deku. Ja sam penzioner. Predanak je moj prihod za takvu vrstu lova.
Su ti medvjedi zaštićena vrsta, nisu?
Pa slušajte, trebate posebno odobrenje. On se odstreljuje u skladu sa planom odstrela. Pazite, ljudi nisu u to vrijeme voljeli baš susjede, a svi su morali stati. To kad do nevolje dođe, onda se ne vole susjedi, velim vam, jer ako uhvati onoga reče, kad ga počne noži stavi pod vrat, reče tu je i Pero, Grga, Mate, Janko.
Ali, znači, u toj dragi je bilo više ljudi posvuda.
Jer nije lako iz drage uteći. Da dođe, šta ja znam, recimo 100 vojnika, a manje i nije išlo. Nije išlo to 10 vojnika.
I vi ste tu onda bili od 44. do kraja rata?
Ne. Kad prođe ofenziva. Znate, to je samo za vrijeme tih ofenziva. Kako se, to nisu one zvanične ofenzive, nego
lokalne.
Da. Provale povremeno.
Ovo što piše Hrvatske šume, to Aha, ali ne koristi se.
Ne.
Migranata da provađaju.
Da provale mogu vam kad budemo išli u tu pećinu tamo blizu moje kuće, pokazat ću vam zgarište, zapalili su kuću, koja je do duše napuštena. Čerka od vlasnika bivšog je vaša sugrađanka u Zagrebu, žena živi, ali ima 80. Stvar nezgodna, ne možete vi sad s puškom na čovjeka. Tu strada kako god hoćeš, ne daj Bože da ga ubiješ, nastradaš, a ovako nismo u opasnosti. Jer ima subode nože, je blizu ova subode. Da vidite, na televiziji je bilo neki dan napali policajce.
Evo tu je od susjede mi ćerka u Jasinku u trgovini i muž je bio lovac, u lovu je. I naišao je na 2 familije, 4 odlasije i 4 djece. Gladni, smrzli i on je ubio srnu. A to je napravo. I brže odera i na štapiće ložio vatru u peci, kaže već to sirovo počeli jesti.
Jel se sjećate te bolnice gore koja je radila?
Kako ne,
jeste vi bili tamo?
Brala smo mi djeca jagode, beri jagode za ranjenike, jedne ne bi pojela, bili smo gladni, goli busi.
Liječili se, kuda? Dolazili, odlazili, počeli malo prije polje.
Znači, pretežno su to bili ranjenici u borbama koji su stradali. Pretežno ranjenici u borbama.
U borbama bili jesu i civili i svi grezni.
Ne. Bilo mi je preteško više ovog umiranja. Onda sam tražila u jedinicu. I onda sam išla. Ali godinu i pol. Jer to je tako teško bilo. Ja sam svakog groba pratila, zajedno sa ovih 4 koji su ga nosili. I onda sam od njih tražila da pjevamo pjesmu.
Gospođo Vera, šta ste pjevali kada biste?
Evo, sad je baš pjevala.
Šta ste pjevali?
Pratimo u hladan grob. Dalje ne znam reći. Svi ćemo u boj. Teže će ti biti pjevajući ozbiljno. Nemoj pjevati.
Ali kad smo to prešli, a vodio nas jedan stari, to drugi nisu ni znali, nego stari koji je bio lovac. I lovci su jedino znali te predjele. Jedan čiča, on nas je vodio, sjećam se dobro, išao je ovako ko ja sad sa štapom. I on je pred nama i sva sela, Radlovići, Grujac, Vukelić, Šekći i Tomića je bilo većina onu stranu koji su išli. Mi smo išli za tim dedom i gore i od nas nije niko strada, sve jedino stradali su koji su išli kuda povodno.
Okay, hello, so we're back. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Sanja, for your really generous and thought-provoking presentation, and also for the premiere of Matia's film. We're super happy, thank you. And also a warm welcome back to Larisa for our roundtable conversation. So this session will be, the second part of this evening will be an opportunity to unpack some of the themes and concepts that Sanja, you introduced in your presentation, and to also lift them up in relation to Larisa's practice and your artworks also. And to our audience that are listening tonight, please share, I mean, if you have any questions for any of the speakers tonight, you can share questions in the comment section below the live, and we will check them throughout the conversation and bring them up as well. So I will kind of head off the roundtable conversation and start with the first question to Sanja. And I think there were so many beautiful moments of somehow like subjective memories, and also the notion of transgenerational memories. So I think I would like to ask a little bit more about the work and engagement that you did in Dresnica with the local community, and somehow how the community, if, you know, when you came there in the beginning, how interested were they in talking about these issues, or did they feel that it belonged to the past? For example, like this lady who at first was maybe a bit hesitant to speak about it, but somehow after a bit of conversation, you open up with her. So
yeah, well, it is actually the experience of approaching the community was happening. I mean, the process was taking a long time in a way. It also takes kind of learning how to do it, how to actually ask the right questions, or how to present your own interest as something that is not only, you know, like an informative talk or like a journalistic investigation, or any kind of, or actually like an expert knowledge exploitation. So it is a skill in itself, but I could say in general that the community is very much open and interested in and welcoming the topic of the Second World War memory, because for the very simple reason, because most of these people were deeply affected, either personally or through the family memories with the events of that period. Of the, and different traumas. So the whole environment of the village and the surrounding landscape is somehow marked also with the remnants, the material or immaterial notions that gives you the sense of importance of that period for the local community. For example, some toponyms in the surrounding landscape are actually related to the period of the Second World War. Like the mountain peaks would be called tents, because the tents were there during the war. So some of these memories are or let's say these symbolic signifiers are not anymore even you know, conscious. So they are just like repetitive in the community, but they also feel very eager to share memories and to guide you, to show you more, or to show you with the expecting that you know the official narrative that was written in the book. They would offer you an expanded version of that, or even a corrected version of that. So in that way, it is also very informative and also, yeah, it offers us as historians or people interested in heritage new perspectives on how to make sense of yeah, this disparity between the official or unofficial narratives.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I would also like to welcome Larisa also into the conversation and kind of link it to your practice, Sanja, because both of you, in quite different ways, you both work with the transference of memory. So in your work, you give body and image to that which time and distance both disembody and obscure. And it's kind of an open question to both of you, but maybe Larisa, how can you, maybe you can flesh this out a little bit, how you work with this in your practice, and particularly with the transference of memory and perhaps even filling out the gaps that we all, you know, think is missing sometimes, or, you know, we cannot find the right work or research to fill in all the cracks, but we know they're there, when it almost becomes a bit like phantasmagorical in that sense.
Thank you, and thank you, Sanja. I have also a lot of questions about your research, but coming back to your question, Marianna, I think, like, for me, the artistic practice is a sort of is the sort of hybrid that serves this double purpose of when trying to understand something where, let's say, there's a huge lack of information, while also trying to use it as a sort of premise or site of. I like something that you said, Sanja, that the site was opening up an imagination. So in the specific context of Do It by Heart exhibition, one of the large installations was inspired by a historical building in Bucharest, which is Sala Omnia, a building that was commissioned by the first ruler of the Communist Party, Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej, as a site, as a construction for that was supposed to serve the party for conferences and diplomatic meetings and spectacles. And this for me was very interesting, because this was a site where power and ideology was putting up a show, making a show out of its the image of itself. And for me, I think, like I said, I think I came into this from a quite lucky position as an artist, because I could take as much as I wanted, or as much as I could get from a scientific research, and kind of filter it out and find a way to not necessarily illustrate, but reproduce my experience of going into that side, of encountering this fragmented history, and also because the building is going through a transition, so now it's closed to the public and it will be renovated and become the new, and it will host the National Dance Center. It also allowed me to kind of imagine what exactly from that history in terms of architectural elements will get lost. And in this sense, I chose to work with soft elements, with something, with those things that it was more probable disappear in the transition, which are actually the decorations. And it's also very beautiful to think of what is, like you also said, what is the general landscape that is offered and has a specific function for the community, and what are the less visible gaps and sites where, let's say, you can scoop up the narratives and history that was not completely controlled or leveled out through an official narrative. So yeah.
I had a sort of follow-up question there, because I thought it was very interesting, Sanja, in your presentation, because you showed a very sort of wide palette of different visual elements and ways of sort of annotating information, such as technological, infrastructural, for example, the maps, hand-drawn, or the sketches for the different memorializations. And I'm thinking that that is something that correlates between both yours and Larisa's practice. Somehow also looking at information and like finding different ways of visualizing it and materializing it. So when you're speaking now about the installation blueprint, Larisa, I know that this installation both deals with sort of architectural annotation, like how that is drawn, like a blueprint, but also a blueprint somehow like for, because there are these panels that you can also talk a little bit more about that have this, you know, almost like sewing pattern. So I think my question would be, how do you see, or like what sort of maybe emancipatory potential do you see in shifting the method of visualizing information or transposing it to another forum, let's say critical heritage or in an artistic context, so you can move the way in which you visualize information? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. Well, actually, we were talking about this the other day when we met, how heritage is still understood in these grand narratives of history being written by actually the most, let's say, by the ones most in power. So it is always the, so what we inherit is the big narrative that is written through the monument, through the hard materials, through the things that cannot be so easily moved or destroyed. And both of us, I think, we're interested into the minor forms of the way history or social collective narrative is written. In the case of Blueprint, this was actually the starting point of the project. So before we even started researching on this specific building and history, we were actually trying to find a way of putting together in a visual form two types of language, and one is the architectural blueprint, and the other one is the cutting pattern usually used for clothing, because even though they are very similar in their function, they describe volumes, they belong to very different histories. And one of them is this sort of a minor, vernacular, non-intellectual, feminine history that I always felt like is in the grand, in the way politics of heritage and history are being written, it's always the first one to be dismissed. And when we started, and when I say we, it's me, and together with an architect, Magda Vieriu, a textile expert, Ekaterina Guzun, and a graphic designer, Juliana Mashko, so whom I invited in this project. And when we started researching into this specific building, we were kind of surprised to see how in a building that was commissioned from scratch to have one specific function, how actually these two logics, these two ways of writing visually and constructing also the space were kind of were very close together. So this very small elements of, let's say, just a paper wall were a replica of a larger construction, or the same, I don't know, forms. You could find them reflected in big and small, and this idea that only the minor ones will get lost in the transition was beautiful and touching in the same way. Yeah, maybe I also show an image. Maybe there are people who have no idea what I'm talking about.
Really?
I think I have to reclaim host and okay, share screen.
Maybe also, Larisa, you can say that this work is something that is being showed at MNAC and is part of the exhibition Do It by Heart, which you can...
Yes, thank you. I'm very bad at this. So I hope this is visible. So this is a first installing of this specific work blueprint in the actual building that inspired it, Sala Omnia, and both the structure and these panels, which kind of imitate this tracing paper that is usually used in architecture. And again, it is less important form of holding information. The tracing paper is a tool of transitioning. Tracing paper is something that you use in architecture to take one element, to move elements from one plane to another, and usually gets discarded in the end. So this was also interesting to kind of bring this imagery forward. And then, yeah, the panels present in low contrast images, graphic exploitations of a sort of common language between three-dimensional elements, let's say, that are found within the building, which are kind of laid out if they were made from textile, and how we would do it in cutting patterns. And what's also beautiful when you start thinking about this or trying to put together these two languages is that you realize that one of them allows for customization. Like the cutting pattern is always something that has a specific body, a specific subject in view, while the architectural blueprint is always realized with a sort of universal body in mind, which, as we know, is always or has been historically a male body. And we have all these situations where buildings are really unfitted for women, where the temperature is who need a higher temperature or different proportions of the space or of the desks and so on. But coming back to this, as you can see, like the elements are kind of like they can be combined together to form images. So we also thought of it as I think like kids see a bucket of Lego. These are the elements. What can you do with them if you put them together? And how can you build something else, but it's still made out of the same materiality, out of the same elements? How can you shift them around? And this is the building, how it was when we visited and researched there. As you can see, it was in an advanced state of, or the beginning of a dismantling, let's say. And now it's not, now it's in full construction. I will stop sharing so that we see each other again.
Thank you, Larisa, for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Sanja, would you have the relationship between?
Yeah, I mean, I find it very interesting that what came to my mind when you asked this question, and when Larisa was speaking about the process of how she approached this building, it came to my mind that what is very, very significant about, what is yeah, okay. let me put it this way. So what I find important to emphasize is what is in relation to heritage and how we can think of it in an alternative way, is to think of it as not as making things better, like as if we are not there yet. So in terms of like filling in the gaps of the canon, this is what is usually expected from the central West perspective. Now that we are done with the division of East and West, now you will come to us to fill in the gaps that we didn't have the chance to see and that we didn't have the chance to interpret. So this is the process that is basically saying, okay, you should just like do the best you can, and this is what is expected from me as an expert, as an art historian, to kind of show that we are also very good modernists and that we are also did these very beautiful things in that period. And this kind of
path. We're on the right path.
And this is why I think it is very important that what you're doing with this building is saying like, no, what is wrong is the canon itself, and we should question it by approaching it from this, by looking at its marginal and the significance of its marginal elements, and then to question what. So this is similar in a way to what we are also, or what I am also, I should speak to in my own, what I came to realize after a certain period of time working on this topic, and being constantly also confronted with this hunger for Eastern European post-socialist imagery, also not necessarily with bad intentions, but the intentions that are definitely speaking from this, as we would say, imperialist perspective still, no? From the perspective that there is an order that needs to, So, yeah, this is like trying to find a way, to kind of escape these traps that are everywhere. Yeah, then I got lost in a village, somehow, like in this unimportant, nobody knows where it is, and so it's and then I can say, okay, we have one monument there as well, so, but it's not important so much. Another thing I didn't mention, which might be interesting for you, Larisa, is that like this monument that appears at the end. So this is like this is why I didn't also show an image of it in my presentation. Where is the hospital with the concrete? It is perceived by several members of the community that we talk to as unfinished. So it is, yeah, it is like, perceived as being just, they started doing these huts and they just didn't finish them. So I found it very, I actually found it like a signal that it's a good monument, because obviously it's still communicating in the way that there is more to be done. It's not the narrative that is in the past. That it's something that's still in the present and that we can work on.
Mm-hmm. I think it also, like the reaction of the local community saying it's unfinished. It also kind of shows how this imperialist look on oneself, like from outside, and is kind of replicated at all levels of the society. They also feel that there's more work to be done for this thing to have a finished look. Yeah. It's just like this woman you were also showing in your presentation in the beginning. She said, her own memory is irrelevant. So but then your question, your interest kind of validated her own having a narrative, not even, it doesn't even matter what narrative, just having a narrative.
Yeah, having a voice.
Exactly. So for me, it was also very interesting to work with a historical building from this point of view, because I arrived at a lot of questions of this sort, like, what do I do with this sort of supra meta identity that belongs to all of us, but now I have to do something with it. And it's a sort of big unwanted heritage that promises a sort of win, but only when you present it out of this context. Like, and it's also funny that this work was first shown in Germany, and then it had to travel back to Romania to show it in a museum here,
I might just jump in there quickly before the next question, Marianna, but I thought it was quite nice that you're speaking about unfinished processes or unfinished artworks, because in the beginning of your presentation, Sanja, you showed the proposal for a monument by Oscar Hansen and Sofia Hansen, right? And Oscar Hansen and Sofia Hansen had this concept of the open form artwork, which is always left unfinished. So I think it's quite nice that we're somehow also returning to the beginning of your conversation with the Hansen.
Yeah. Exactly, and this is why I also like to continue what I started in the last response. It is also of course that this like art historically, it is very relevant that we look into those monuments, and even more so into the ideas for monuments that were never made, that were never realized, that are even more interesting. But it is somehow like understanding them, it is somehow beyond, the normative criteria of evaluation that is related to the Western modernist project, because it is somehow also opposing it, or it is somehow, not fitting in. Because when you look at the history, like art history of monuments, then you have like this, like, the standard monument, and then you have the counter monument with, I don't know, 79 Mile in the US. I mean, these kind of thoughts were generated much earlier in the context of certain peripheric, cultural scenes. And so this is and then another thing that is very important to me is also to think of how to, how to apply other criteria than the formal ones, comparative formal analysis, especially when we look at the certain practices that were mostly occupied by women. And for example, in Yugoslavia, it was landscaping, it was landscape architecture. It was like working with nature, designing the nature, and also very much being concerned with environmental issues already in the 60s. And these, qualities have never been part of the official normative, the canon, somehow always on the margins. And yeah, of course, they are also the female part of the practice. So this is something that, like, we should try to say again, unlearn, in order to kind of learn to kind of affirm in the ways that we find meaningful for today. I mean, because we are doing this from the perspective of current concerns.
Yeah, then I have a follow-up question on that, Sanja. And would you say, I mean, if we go back to the Yugoslav or former Yugoslav region, how, I mean, there's so much narratives of the anti-fascist struggle that has not been, let's say, documented or archived in a proper sense, since, as you said, like now that generation, unfortunately, is, slowly also, passing. And as you mentioned, the woman also in your presentation, how she's illiteral, so she cannot basically even document this process or like these histories herself. So then these micro narratives become super important for our history, because of course we're rewriting history every day, but particularly for that in time, like particularly that period during the partisan and anti-fascist struggle. And I just how do they feel about it, talking about these stories? Do they feel that it belongs to the past, or they want to engage within it? Or
I think many of them would like it to belong to the past, because it's very much a burden. Because when this is something that struck me very much in direct encounter with the people, how these memories, the traumas are very much alive, and people are very emotional talking about the history of their families. They're mostly not the first-hand experiences or their childhood experiences, but they are very much, strongly like they're haunting, as you were also interested in this idea of hauntology. Like they're really somehow there. It's not something that you can just decide to put in the past. And especially in the period, in the circumstances of today, that are completely unprospective, that offer no perspective for the local community. And it is the economic crisis, and the depopulation of the whole area. So people are like, the young people are not deciding to stay there for obvious reasons. The industry and like everything that was generated is a long time missing. So any kind of like material foundations for living, and also different forms of also discrimination against the local community, because they are Serbian population, Serbian minority in Croatia. So there are a very, very complex set of circumstances that also are those that are not letting the ghosts of the past, somehow to settle. So they somehow are time and again they are kind of like awaken in a way, So the very fact that like the only gatherings that are there, that where you have more people, are ones about the past, about that is very sad in a way, because it's somehow it is only now that the past is connecting the community, whereas when you look at the photo archive, like this amateur photo archive that we are gathering along the way through the Facebook page and etc., we are kind of like trying to engage the community in this media as well. You see that it didn't used to be like that. Those places, those monuments, the sites where the people gathered were also sites of, celebrations of, whatever kind of like living practices of today, of the future, of imagining the future, of having certain plans. So I think it is very much, down to economics and also, but the situation, I'm not sure that I managed to kind of fully explain elaborate on this process that happened after the dissolution of Yugoslavia and the end of socialism here, and the war in the 90s, and what it really meant in terms of how this heritage that used to be very highly regarded, that had really important political function as well, that overnight became like completely negated. That overnight, along with this political, symbols, you get like complete, shutting down the, or kind of like, disabling people to like publicly, you know, remember, to commemorate, to identify with this history. It is a very, very problematic, you know, politically and socially very problematic period. It is still, in a way, going on, and it is now maybe even more so because it is kind of it has kind of became an institutionalized practice. You know, like this kind of like very silent power, or soft power that is already somewhere. It is not something that is discussed publicly, like this museum, you know, like this stuff that you find in the museum, and there is not really a way to kind of address this because it already, you know, the answer is already it has passed like so many years, and we have no money to deal with this, and so this is not now, you know, the situation where you can respond like by confronting them on the level of, you know, political attitudes or ideological. It is just, you know, bureaucracy kind of. So a lot of issues that we could talk about more concerning heritage politics here, but
yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, it feels like there's also such a strong political manipulation of, let's say now, like the Yugoslav heritage also, but like how it functions, let's say on a political and social level, but then within the local and more like minority narratives, how it has such a complete different impact of it. And the discrepancies between, of course, the political, social and cultural, which is, super problematic in many sense, but also a bit sad somehow that, I mean, it cannot be recognized still. I mean, of course, due to many factors, but how there's also so much narration and stories and micro narratives and communities and traditions that have like the potential of being lost, you know, somehow. But also, I mean, hopefully also what you're doing with your research and also in that Larisa is doing in her work, like, of course, we can like recollect it somehow and give body and image to what, you know, different geopolitical or political aspects are trying to obscure. But it's a constant battle. I mean, whether it's on an institutional level or social or cultural. But yeah, the impact that it actually has on, I mean, not on everyone, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, but also, as I said in the concluding part of my presentation, I also find it very, you know, fruitful and fertilizing in a way that it produces like this situation that we it's kind of like looks horrible and tragic and like everything collapsed and whatever. But in this collapse, you know, there is some kind of, you know, clearance of, you have a maybe clearer perspective of certain, you know, certain things. Like this is something I always say, like the whole situation with the monuments now in the USA, and, you know, like in the West, it is such a shocking thing, you know, that you have some, you know, a monument attacked, you know. So as if it is shocking that this, you know, the hegemony is, you know, there. And I mean, it is not, it shouldn't be so shocking, you know. But then this is also the thing of what heritage itself and what, you know, what is listed and what is considered to be the norm that we should all respect, and what is omitted from that, again, no? So in this processes, however, you know, difficult they are, but what I'm also like trying to do through, or like follow along the way through my research, is to catch and to document, you know, all of these like bottom-up initiatives throughout the country or the former Yugoslav region that are very much, you know, empowering for the local communities when they take, you know, issues into their own hands, and when they deal with the memory the way they think it should be done, you know, like also in the way of like repairing monuments, rebuilding or doing something with those structures that is very often, you know, in conflict with the official, you know, expertise on how these monuments should be treated. They shouldn't be colored white. They should be, you know, but you know, it's and these processes are very inspiring, and this is something where I think when we want to talk about unlearning, how to unlearn heritage, this is the way, you know, to kind of like forget that that all, or kind of make it more become more aware of the fact that all of these you know, protocols and ideas, what should be done and how it should be you know, renovated, and all of these theories that were generated along this discipline, to question them, you know, to question them for whom they, in whose benefit they work.
But I just want to say something in relation to what you just said, Sanja. I feel it's really such a fundamental difference, and it's important to underline this difference between how your group can function on a grassroots level when it starts from questions of memory and the way like the mental collective organizes in a certain area, while we are in contrast to the way politics are being articulated regarding these issues, because politics usually try to, you know, so-called depoliticize and say, this is how we deal with all monuments, this is how we deal with architectural patrimony, this is how we deal with I don't know, folklore and so on. So it by saying that we do not care about the period or the politics that determined this sort of culture or content, they are actually enforcing the current ideological thinking that we have. So I think it's also important to take into consideration this aspect, because if we don't start from grassroots community, if you don't go on the site, if you don't expose firstly yourself as a researcher, artist, or whatever to that specific thing that you are reflecting upon or you're trying to produce from, you're only gonna, I think you're only going to reproduce the official narrative. So because we're talking about these monuments in the States, you know, nobody's attacking the monuments of the neoliberal capitalism. They, you know, or they're attacking the front store because they have the sneakers or the food that they want, but not actually what this thinking has produced in terms of monuments. You know, they're attacking a certain historical form of representation, because that is allowed now. And I think that's also important to reclaim, like these minor lived experiences, because that's what firstly created that, let's say, that cultural or historical layer to begin with. Sorry, I got so with this, but yeah.
I see that we're getting up to 7 o'clock here, so I'm thinking whether we should do final reflections and then maybe we'll round off, I think.
Yeah, let me check also if there has come in any questions on the chat.
There's someone who commented.
Great.
Sometimes architecture is not only a witness, but also a host. I have to admit, I haven't paid attention when exactly this comment appeared, but it feels like...
I think it appeared in relation to Sala Omnia, I think, on your work blueprints, I think.
Yeah, it feels like, and for sure Sala Omnia is itself not just a witness of what happened there historically, but a representation of the way, as I was saying, that power was articulating itself at that time. And what is interesting is that it was commissioned by Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej, and then during the construction he already died, and a new ruler came in power. So by the time of its construction, this monolithical, as it's seen from the West, party was, or this monolithic vision of visual representation was already in change, was already shifting, and for sure this is also something important and worth further investigating, because we also had a limited amount of time there until renovations began. And I'm really curious to see again what layer will be kept out of it and how it will be, let's say, instrumentalized in this constant run for how is it called when you are you're making the building more functional? It's always the function that seems to prevail, which we know it's not really the case. But yeah, thank you, Astrid.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, Marianna, I will hand over to you.
Yes, but unfortunately, I think it's time to round up. There are, we can, I think, go on for a very long time and talking about all sorts of like decommunization processes and heritage manipulation and traces of history, and how we can, to use a quotation by Benjamin, to brush history against its grain. But I think we will have to end our session for today. And of course, we would like to give a big thank you to the participants. So thank you, Larisa, and thank you, Sanja, and also thank you, Matia, for the premiere of the short documentary. And I think if anyone has any questions regarding the project that we have been discussing today, feel free to contact us or any of us. And we will facilitate you with those questions. And I think with that said,
so we should say goodbye. And
yes, and also thank you to
Mnak,
to Mnak also for hosting us, and Larisa, of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Olivia and Marianna. It was really a pleasure, and just
to be continued.
We're not continued. Absolutely, I hope so. And if there are any questions regarding any specific particular things about, because I talked a lot about many things, so if there is something that remain unclear, people should contact me on my email. You should provide them with And I hope that we could meet in Bucharest to see the exhibition before it ends.
Nice.
Cross our fingers and hope that this may happen.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye and just stop the live transmission. Okay.
Audience.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks.